Hi everyone, Mature Simmer here. So I'm getting this going a little bit early so that you can share the excitement with me. I'm pretty sure when we hit 10 o'clock, and you can see we're at 9:59, moving that over on the truck so you can see it a little better, that we'll be able to harvest. Crops are at 20% right now. There we go. I was a little worried because it took a moment, but I've gone ahead and gotten everything connected so that we can begin, and we will start our harvest. Not really finish our harvest, but we'll start the work that needs to be done. So very excited that I'm finally able to do this. So about an hour and a half later than when I had been on finishing up the previous work I'd been doing on the server. And we're moving along. So I've got it's been a little bit of time, so just as a reminder to everybody, we've got 89 here to get done, and then 97 and 98 up north near the silo. And then we are complete with the harvest for the oats in year 75 here. So let me get all this set up. I had not played with my GPS, so I did make sure everything was connected. I brought the truck over. So like I said, I definitely did a few things, just not quite as much as I could have done, I guess. But no biggie. So, yeah, I mean, we're still probably looking at several hours of work. So there's going to be some time that I'm going to have to spend on here to get these things taken care of. Haven't turned off my HUD in a while, so we'll give you a cleaner view of the action here so that you can see things. Yeah, it's interesting. Oats definitely seems, at least in my experience, to have more of these small dead zones that I think come with seasons. So I don't know that I see it as much with wheat. Those are really the two I've done. I mean, I've done some rye, quite a bit of rye, but that's now been over 10 game years ago. So be 120 days, so like 4 months at least. So I don't remember it being quite this prevalent in anything. So I think oats seems to be more susceptible to this type of thing. So as we get close to wrapping up the year, you know, the next thing on the agenda, aside from obviously waiting for the hemp to finish and be able to be harvested, is going to be the decision point we have all the time after we're done with harvest, is exactly what are we going to do with the crops we just pulled in. Are we holding them to sell later? Are we at a sell point that we're comfortable with going ahead and cashing in now? And I don't usually really look ahead because there's not really a point, because just as we've seen here in year 75, if I had looked that first day when I was starting to harvest, because I wasn't thinking I'd have any rain, I was thinking I'd be complete with that harvest that day, and looked at the pricing, and now we're sitting here, I think 3 days later. The prices are obviously not the same, so looking ahead or trying to anticipate, oh, I'll be done in 2 days. You know, what does the in-game price look like? Because that's really the only one where we've got anything we can speculate on with a graph or anything. It's just kind of a exercise in futility because we don't know what will get thrown at us as far as ability to complete the work, either having the time to do it, having the ability to do it with the rain clamping down on us or the dew. Because I know there was a little bit of rain, you know, as I was leaving the server last night. I saw there was going to be some rain overnight, but it was just a small amount. And I had debated for a moment, like, wow, you know, because after midnight it had become dry enough to harvest at that point. So the crops had dried out when it switched to the new month, new day, however you want to look at it. And for a split second, I was like, oh, I might need to take advantage of it, but, you know, common sense prevailed, and I knew I needed to get to sleep, so. And I knew I still had 3 or 4 days of possibility to get this crop off the field, and had the optimism that one of these days in those 4 that we'd be able to harvest. So it has worked out for us, and at this point, as I said, I haven't checked the forecast again because it usually doesn't change that frequently. But at this point, I'm just making the assumption that just like I saw for 2 days, it's open, but it doesn't really matter. I just need it to be open without rain or any kind of moisture issue for hopefully the next few hours, not necessarily the next few days. And then beyond that, some of the choice we'll have is, as I talked about in the video, in the episode where I was liming, checking this field of the couple rows that I had harvested versus where we have crop, it definitely goes from okay to bad on the pH, so these oat fields now need to be limed, and so I can certainly do that. I've got a much more open window to do that because that can be done even when the ground is frozen. So I could leave it for winter work if I'd want to do that. It would give us something else to do during the live stream, but I think some of the folks I've talked to who might be on have said they've got some work on their farm, so we might also be able to help them out. So I don't want to necessarily kick the can down the road so far that I can't go ahead and get the work done that I need to get done, because while you can lime in winter, when the fields are covered in snow, though, that kind of creates a little bit more of a challenge to try to get equipment there and so forth. So I don't think I'll be waiting for that till the winter. So the decision's really going to be, do I get it done in the fall, or do I just leave it for the spring and it's kind of part of the planting cycle? Right. So yeah, sometimes unless you're down, you know, in the like cab level or something, or you know, where you know you're at the ground level with the equipment, it's hard to appreciate how hilly some parts of this map are, which is just really nice because it's not just a flat terrain. You know, I've had curiosity, not enough to actually do anything about it, obviously, but just what's involved and how challenging it is when you're working on a map to take it from flat to terrain like this. It's just, there's a lot of folks that don't do a lot of natural undulation in their terrain. So I'm thinking there's more involved than something trivial. But I think, this is a big part for me of what makes this map feel like it's a real place, because it is modeled on a real place, but and built over satellite maps of a real place, but so are some other maps that then are perfectly flat on their contours, and there's at least some elevation change here and there, because even in somewhere like Nebraska or something, there are places where you're at least going to have a little bit of some hills here and there. Again, the elevation change may be a few feet, but it's still an elevation change, and I just don't know if it's just really hard to model that, and that's why people don't take the time to do it, because they've spent so much time doing the other pieces, laying out the fields, going ahead and placing trees and other points, that at that point they've had enough of design and they just want to get it out into the world. But there's just something to be said for doing something like this that is a lot more fun for me. I just enjoy these kind of maps substantially more than flat maps. And that's really it. It's really more the flatness than it is even the size of the fields. Because if I was to say what challenge do I have with liking Wild West, for example, as a map that we had available on FSN that I could have chose to move on to and instead chose not to, why did I make that choice? And I would say, if I really think back on it and reflect on it, it was less about how big the fields were and more about just how boring the map felt because it was flat. Sure, the fields were square, rectangular for the most part, but I've certainly found, as I've worked this farm for a long time, I don't necessarily have a problem with a rectangular field. A rectangular field on an undulating hillside just doesn't honestly feel like a rectangular field, because you're still moving up and down. You've got times where the header won't make contact or so forth, because for us, 29 is a rectangular field. This one is a rectangular field, but I still sometimes run into seeder won't seed, harvester won't do something, just because of the terrain as well. So it introduces that variety. So that's where, as I said, if I eliminate the other gaps in the North Dakota map that I was running for a couple episodes to try it out, there was nothing about, the fields are huge, that would keep me from running something like that in FSN here. It's just, the other pieces of, I get bored very quickly because it's just flatness. And in some of the comments I've gotten on the video from people who live in the area, when I talked about why the fields are contoured the way they are, that it, being on the map doesn't make any sense to me. They explained there's hills that I guess are called coulees, is the term used out in that area of the country, and that's what, looking at the satellite overlay where they were gray in some of those areas, that's what they felt was there. And so what we really should have are hills that are obscuring the visibility to see certain, across the fields, and just drive smoothly from one area to another, so it would make sense why I'm going around this thing, because I'm going around a hill, and it may not be a huge hill, but it's a hill nonetheless that isn't present on the modeled map. So instead I've just got this giant flat expanse of, wheat in that case, that looks nice for a few minutes, but frankly doesn't hold my attention very long. So like there was another one in FS19 that was just a giant map that I had some interest in, Peace River. And that just had a lot of flatness to it too, and that may be the terrain there, but that's what I've ultimately found, I guess, is just it's not necessarily the field shapes, it's the sterility you get from a perfectly flat map, because we're all human beings living in the world, and we know even in areas that are flat in the world, there's still a little bit of movement in the terrain. A creek has cut a little bit of a embankment, this, that, or whatever, that then ultimately meandered over time and did something to the ground, and doesn't get filled in later after the course changes for that stream. So there's just little things like that. So there have been times where I'm like, maybe I'll try to do that part of something with Giants Editor, but I just kind of come back to, I enjoy playing the game, and with the amount of time I've got, it's just not something. Oh, my GPS is locked again. Goodness gracious, it's really locked. I hate when this happens. Alright, I'm going to turn it off. Alright, now it's finally freed up again. Yeah, sometimes when it just takes over, it just takes over. So yeah, it was not responding to me pressing the throttle. So it just was driving forward. It was a runaway harvester. Sounds like a potential horror movie. Life on the farm, the runaway harvesters coming to get me. Suppose it would only resonate with certain people, those of us that like Farming Simulator, maybe. But anyway, yeah, it was a little crazy there, but we saved it, and we're back in the field. Let me get my pipe back here. Let's hope I don't talk through the fill point and run into the field. I've been pretty good with that so far, but I've also been harvesting for 15 minutes or so I'm not going to give myself too much credit. Alright, so let's get that truck moved over. So we're at 46% full here. So we've got 2 or 3 more harvester load fulls before. And I guess what I mean is that the harvester will need to get filled up, including this one, because we're going to be able to get 2 full harvesters in here. I think the third one is going to top us off, and we'll have to go transport things, but we'll get a couple in here before that, so that'll get us a good way through the field, because obviously this is our second time stopping the fill here, and we made a good dent here in the field because of the low yield of oats, or at least the low yield we're getting now. So I had just spent a little bit of time while the rain was doing its thing and I couldn't harvest, of taking a look at the finances for the farm, and actually kind of walked through it, what I was seeing on another episode that I was going to pull together. So I'm not sure if maybe it had been posted already, so you may have seen it before you'll see this one, because it doesn't really fit within sequence specifically. So I think it'll just be how the mood strikes me and order of release on those. But so you may have already seen it if you've kind of been keeping up with things as they come out. But if not, yeah, there's some variation in the oats that I'm certainly intrigued about, that I'm going to try to use this harvest to learn more about and see what was the anomaly. Because the issue you've got is, you know, when you're doing any kind of analysis, if you only have 2 data points and they're significantly different, until you get a third set of data, you don't really know which one's likely to be what happens most of the time. You just simply have 2 data points and you don't know where reality is going to settle until you get at least one more set of data. So that's what this will be for me, for oats. You know, and that'll be the same thing for the insanity of the hemp supply, although I did ask a question on the FSN Discord, and someone did chime back in and tell me that the seed consumption for hemp is normal, what I was seeing. So if that's the case, because some people I think have suggested that it might be a bug, but it does not appear to be a bug, at least not as it's considered in FSN. And that'll all be okay as long as the financial model pans out, that high consumption of supply gets covered and rewarded with a high revenue once this crop goes to market. So we'll see what we see there. Open my pipe up here, because then as I pass the truck I can have it dump a little bit in there. It just lets us keep moving a little bit more, so it just shortens our length of time a bit. Although honestly I think all it really dumps is about 1,000 liters at most into the truck as it goes by, so I think maybe that buys us an additional 15 seconds of movement, but it's still something. So yeah, so I don't know that it was even that much. It may have just been a few hundred liters that came out, but it's something, because in the end, if the harvester is not moving, we're not making progress. Because that's really the work that's trying to get completed, is getting these oats off the field. Yeah, the one thing, I'm pretty sure this field in front of me, which is part of the border of the map, I don't think they actually are able to be purchased and used the way FSN functions. Because I've always thought about, that might not be a bad field to have, and then take the time over years to cut out that forest and, you know, just square off that field and get yourself a pretty good hunk of real estate. Because if we look at that, you know, it's here, I think this is the forest. No, I guess this is the forest. So it'd be field 116, and in theory, you know, it shows up as a selectable space, but I've never seen those border edges actually come up for auction. So I think they're on the map as a continuity piece, because I think I've looked at this map off of, I don't know if it was ModHub, but you know, one of the places where you can get it to just look at it in single player, and I don't think those fields are actually there in the single player map numbered the way they are here. So I think the FSN asset team made modifications to the map to do that, but those fields along the edges of maps don't tend to come up for sale. So I think I'm going to be able to get to the end of this row and then turn around before I'm full, so I'll be able to make sure I have the back trailer filled before I fill the front. And like I said, I think we'll not quite fill up the truck on this load, but we'll see where we're at. We may just only be a few thousand liters short, but once again, we don't want to run a truck partially empty because there's not really a reason to, and doesn't make sense. Because we've certainly got enough oats here to fill the truck. And then what could happen is, you know, you could send a few trucks up partially. It's locked again, come on. GPS locking up again, and it's still locked up. There we go. Wow. Yeah, sometimes it's just kind of a constant thing, and sometimes you won't have it happen for hours on end. So I don't know what causes it, because obviously if I did, I would certainly try to avoid it if I could. But I'm not doing anything that unique, so my guess is I probably couldn't, because I obviously need to be able to harvest and so forth. So just kind of paying attention to the fill meter here. I don't want to, again, blow past it. Alright, so I think kind of out of things to chat about at this point. So I think I'm going to go ahead and continue on, just as we normally do, because again, there's a lot of work here. We're almost a half an hour into when we started, and you know, we're maybe halfway done with just this field, and we've got a couple more to go. So there's more work here than I think I could reasonably expect any audience members to sit through. So I'm going to go ahead and make this video a little briefer, and I'll see you in a bit. another harvest nearly in the books. So it did not take me 5 hours. So I had some time that I had to step away. So it was certainly probably still 3 hours though. So there's a lot here, as I'm sure you've just seen if you've watched through between when I spoke and when I came back here. So hopefully it was all worthwhile and relaxing and fun to just observe what was happening in the harvest. I am going to empty this harvester right into the silo, which is what I normally do because I've gotten the truck basically completely full. So, and at this point I've got to head that way anyway to get the harvester back, get it repaired. I do need to do a better job of paying attention to the situation is. I just looked and realized how little gas I have left. One of these days I'm going to actually run out of fuel, and I don't have anything to bring me fuel, so that would be not fun. I'm either begging for help for someone who does, or again, there isn't always somebody on. I think Swede's still on. We're doing his grass work. He popped in at some point. You may have noticed. But let's see. We've got 700. We're going to roll to 800 here. Yep, there we go. 800,000 and then another truck. So we're going to have about 880,000 maybe. Maybe bumping up right up against 900,000 in oats. So it's been a good harvest. Things have gone according to plan, which they usually do if you put together a relatively decent plan, which I try to do each time. Not always successful, and sometimes there's things I can't control, such as weather and so forth, as we had with the cotton. I do need to tow this back. I'm kind of continuing, assuming that I could just drive, and I can't do that, so. So we'll haul this back, we'll get everything repaired, cleaned up, refilled, ready to go for next time. Worried it wasn't quite in the right place because I was expecting that attach option to come up a little earlier than it did, but all's good. Got the header behind us. So yeah, we've done a significant amount of work with all this equipment. At this point, our key items, the tractor, the harvester, the truck, are all above 100 hours. So there's been a lot going on in this farm. A lot more expected to come. But yeah, so these grass swaths here, if you recall when we drove up here, they weren't there. And it looks like maybe he didn't quite get it all done. I'm not actually sure if he left or not. He did. He just hadn't popped up anything, and I probably didn't see it pop up when he left. So as you can see, we were both pretty busy. Not a lot of chatter this time, and everybody was focused on getting what they needed done. I had let the group know on our server Discord that things were drying up around 10, so that might have helped somebody, him pop in later, but once again, it was probably around 1:45, 2 p.m. my time, so I think there's a 6-hour time difference, so it was later in the evening there, mid-evening, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, where he's at. So I think he had the opportunity to get in for a little bit. And at this point, it's after 9 p.m. there, so it's getting a little later, and depending on what they had planned, he might have only had that little bit of time. And, part of it is he's got to mow grass, he's got to then let it dry so it can turn into hay so he can bale it up and so forth. So there is a good amount of waiting with grass work as you wait for things to dry and so forth. And at least today he's got a good shot, because tomorrow it should still stay dry. So hopefully he'll have hay in the next day or two, and he can bale that up and do what he needs with it. Sure, some will stick around for the cows, some will go in the TMR mixers, things like that. But another good day on the server, definitely. A lot of activity. I don't even know where I'm at. I'm like, whose field is that? There's nobody else down here but me. It's my field. I just thought I wasn't quite as far along as I thought I was. So I had to quickly look at the mini-map and then realized my ridiculousness, but that's my hemp. It's like somebody grow a crop in a field that they don't even own. But no, that wasn't the case. So, get this header cleaned up. Get the harvester cleaned up. Still filling up gas, so this is our biggest gas tank, I believe, by far. So, which is good. Otherwise, I would have run out of gas for certain. But yeah, so it looks like I'm kind of right at the maximum capacity for running across all the fields. So there we go, $1,251 in fuel. And now we'll go probably get our $2,000 repair bill. And then I'm going to have to try to back out of here to not run through the new crop. So normally I have some opening there, but no such luck this time, because I've planted only 1,300, so not too bad. I think the one time I had the $1,000 or the $2,000 repair bill on the harvester, I think I had forgotten to do things for a couple harvests. So alright, so I am going to just come in this way instead of the other way that I was in. And if I fold the harvester, that will also help, because I won't have a pipe hanging out that will be catching on things. But at this point, yeah, I can pull over here, which is again one of the reasons I tucked away that corn header, so that I have some options. And I'm just not liking it. I want it nice and snug up against there and straight, so that when I pull the truck back in, I'm not having to be further out just because. So we'll swing back around and put it in this way. So that'll give us a nice long straightaway for it to straighten out. Oop, too far. I did get my foot off the gas, or at least I thought I did. So let me grab my truck. Obviously empty that out. So not quite 80,000, but as I said, quite close. And obviously, again, with where we were headed, made little sense to run over to the truck to put a few hundred liters in and then come back to the silo anyway, so. Just hit it on the way by is always, it's always a good plan. So yeah, I will, I'm certainly going to miss this place once we move to an FS22 map. I've grown to really enjoy the setup I've got, how things are organized. Just, obviously there's the habits and the comfort of knowing the fields and so forth, but there's also the new potential of doing the same thing on a new map. So still waiting to see what happens. We're not past the first of the year yet. I think there will be a lot more activity on all fronts, on the FSN front, on the Giants front, on modders fronts after we get past the new year. So we'll see what the new year brings, but I would anticipate it's probably a safe bet that sometime in 2022 I'll be moving to an FS22 server in FSN. If it takes longer than that, we've got significant problems, but right now there's still things being worked out, like what productions are going to look like. So the good news on that front from my perspective is it looks like we're going to be allowed to have them. I was not sure that was even going to be the case. It may have simply been, well, you're just on new maps, but you're basically doing the same thing and not doing production. But right now what they're trying to work out is permitting and determining what the cost of permits should be to own various production types. So I'll look forward to that, and then I'll start dissecting what that looks like and what might make sense, because we'll certainly, I assume, have that information before we even move to an FS22 server. And right now, at least what the other FMs are telling me, is none of them are in any rush to make the move. They're kind of seeing the same type of things that I am on FS22, that just make it a poor fit for this multiplayer experience here right now. So until that changes, we'll just continue our work here on Hilly Seneca, and if I had my druthers, I think I'd like to have another hilly something in FS22, so that's the kind of map I probably would look for kind of what I was saying. I think, again, it's so long ago and things run together. I think it was this episode that I was talking about some of the maps that were coming out, and like Hastings, North Dakota, and just the flatness and how it has nothing to do with the fields being rectangular that is dull. It's having a map that truly looks fake because it's just 100% flat. Whoop. Well, so much for parking that cleanly. Now I messed it up with a truck. Can't take me anywhere. Okay. Disconnect. Pull away. Shut off. Oh, I forgot to repair, but I think the truck wasn't too bad, if I recall. Alright, so at this point, I'll just take a quick look before I sign off as to what we've got. So nothing needs plowing. Obviously 89, 97, 98 are harvested. It's always a trick trying to guess what growth stage we're at, but we're certainly, I think, beyond the first two, other than these couple swaths, so we may have harvestable hemp tomorrow. So I was thinking I would have to wait till late autumn, but that may not be the case. And then with regards to our situation here, our yield map is our yield map. So we were getting like 85, sometimes even as low as 80% on some of our fields. I'm not quite sure there's much we can do there. I think that has to do with the soil type. Obviously 85, 86 and so forth, you know, we just fertilized them when we planted, so those are good, but obviously these are dark. And I would say that these, well, I can't get close enough to the data, but it's almost like not on the spectrum. It's like a brown. So that's always been a bit confusing to me. And then on the pH scale, again, we're down. Well, see, we're like in dark green. Like, again, these scales don't match up. Like what I just limed is not really there. So not quite sure what I'm seeing, but that's what I'm seeing. So we'll just keep going by the readings, and we'll go from there. But that's all we've got. So I will see you next time.